In this video, I'm going to cover real quick some very common objections in life insurance sales conversations. The most important thing to take away from this particular video is really to think through and document. Like whenever I'm doing sales calls, I have a little notebook right next to me, right? Pen and paper, old fashioned. And every time I get an objection that I haven't encountered before, or maybe I stumbled over, I'm going to write that down, or I'm going to take a little note, and then I'm going to follow up later, and I'm going to add it to my list of objections. And you can see here is just in the context of life insurance. And again, this is a simple exercise, right? I don't sell life insurance every single day, but the process is more important than the specifics. But hopefully this will be helpful for you, because all I did was I thought through some common objections and some ways that I would handle that objection. And that's what you should be doing, right? You in particular, if you're selling life insurance, probably are far more capable than I am of coming up with ways to overcome objections. But the process is so much more important than the actuality of what you're going to see in this list. But I want to give you a very practical example, right? So what have I done? I've thought through a series of different potential objections that people could have when I'm talking to them about life insurance. And then I thought through, instead of thinking on my feet, right? That's the worst thing you can do in sales, is think on your feet. Instead, you want to think through that and what is the best way to give that person confidence that you, one, are listening to their objection and acknowledging it, and then showing that, hey, there's a different path here, or I can overcome that. I can show you a way to make that possible, right? So let's run through them real quick. I can't afford it, right? Again, super simple when you sit here and you look at it right here. But if somebody hits you with that and you're thinking on your feet, you're probably going to and it's going to throw you off track of your sales pitch and your process for selling, and you're going to get like all mumbly mouth, right? So in this particular case, you can have already thought through it, and you just simply say, hey, like a lot of people think that, right? A lot of people start talking to me and assume that it's too expensive, but hey, there's policies for a lot of different budgets. There's things that we can account for, risk that we can overcome, that we can do at all kinds of different levels and budgets, right? So we can certainly find a policy that fits within your budget and covers the things that you are or should be concerned about, right? Or covers your final expense, or helps those who may be left behind to handle those last expenses, right? I'm too young. I don't need life insurance. Again, younger people think you're invincible. The other thing, and you're going to see this over and over again, particularly in life insurance, is people think of that in the context of a family, where, as you know, from selling life insurance, a lot of times there are other folks that need to be accounted for in your particular life circumstance, right? So the risk to your life could put others in an unenviable position, right? And so there are loved ones, there are beneficiaries. So that's why I oftentimes like to talk in terms of beneficiaries, like who is your beneficiary. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a wife or a husband or a spouse or a partner or kids and that sort of thing. It could be someone else, right? Or it could be a variety of different people. I don't have dependents. Again, sort of a similar thing. There are financial burdens that are incurred, for those that are left behind. What are those? And sometimes you can even use objections like this to kind of, let's talk about those for a second. Like, what happens? Like, if you were to pass unexpectedly, what would happen? And then, again, this is what's good about writing things down. You could have a list of things that are normally incurred expenses, right? Final expenses in that unexpected sort of demise, right? And so you can list out some common things. And from your calls, you probably heard people talk about some common things that they're concerned about. So this is a great way to test some of those themes, or to maybe even say them out loud. And as a result, people are like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that, right? I already have life insurance on my job. Again, a lot of times people will get this and they won't even look at the coverage. They don't know what that coverage is. They just assume they're covered, right? Same reason that people with home insurance and those sorts of things, flood happens, oh, you don't have flood insurance, right? So a lot of times people get policies, they don't really look at that. Again, this is a good opportunity to be helpful and sort of jump out of selling mode for a second and say, hey, let's take a look at that. Let's see what you have, right? Let's see what you're covered. Let me use my expertise to run through some of that policy and really help you to understand the coverage that you have. I don't believe in life insurance. Again, a lot of times this is, just people sort of not thinking through or trying to avoid thinking through that eventuality, right? So anyway, there's, again, you can kind of think through those. I don't understand it. I'll get to it later. Again, the most important thing is to really think through these different objections and ultimately come to how you're going to handle that objection without being put on the spot or having to think on your feet. The other thing that's really important when you're scripting, right? And sometimes I like to, you can see this is, I'm just kind of thinking through in this particular document, and I could share this as a link down in the description, but wherever you're seeing this. But the other thing that's kind of interesting about this is I'm thinking through like how to handle it, but when I do handle it, when I actually write the script, it's super helpful to use kind of the steps to objection handling, right? I want to make sure that you understand that I heard you, so I want to acknowledge it. I want to make sure that you're comfortable that I'm listening to you and I'm responding to you, and I'm also not dismissing your concern, right? So things like I understand, that's common. A lot of people think that. Yes, I've heard that before. Again, things that make that particular objection okay, right? It was okay. I'm not defensive. I'm going to sort of catch that objection, and then we're going to talk about it. And so that's where your pivot comes in, because ultimately you want to get back on track, right? You want to acknowledge the objection. You want them to feel comfortable raising objections, because it's better for them to say it than to hold it back and think it, and you move through your sales process without them saying a word. Meanwhile, they've put up, unknown to you, 5 or 6 different barriers you don't even know about, and you can't push through, right? So it's good, and the first time you get an objection, make sure that you make them very comfortable in raising objections, because it gets them stated, it gets them out there, and you can deal with them. If they're in their head, you can't deal with them. So a lot of times in your script for that first one too, you could say, yes, please, throughout this discussion, ask lots of questions. You will have concerns. You will have questions. I want you to be comfortable asking those questions. And this is a great one to start with, right? Because this is very common concern. A lot of people think that they can't afford it and that it's too expensive. However, there are a lot of ways that we can shape an insurance policy to cover what you need covered, but at the same time also fit into a budget and make it affordable, right? So again, think about the construction of handling that objection, but again, also making them comfortable making objections, get it out of their head, but pivot and get back on track so that you can move them forward in your straight line, right? I'm too young. Again, these are all great examples, which I'll link in the description, of ways to acknowledge, catch that objection, make them comfortable making the objection, and then ultimately satisfying, helping them to understand, making them comfortable that we have a shared understanding. Again, sort of getting them to acknowledge is super important here. And then ultimately getting them back on track. So another common thing with objections is this is why, again, you want to script it, you want to think about it before, is it sort of shakes you and you don't know, like, where did I leave off? How do I get back on track? So it's really important for you to practice. Okay, this is what I call my happy day scenario. This is like exactly how I would go through a sales call if everything goes properly. Here's all of my objections that might get me off track. And then, where are these going to occur? And how do I pivot back to get back to this? So I'm using these two lists together. Oh, here's my objection. I'm acknowledging it. I'm handling it. Boom, I'm back on track. right? I'm going to go through another objection. Oh, where's that objection? Here it is. I'm handling it, acknowledging it, making them feel comfortable with it. Boom, back on track and move through the thing. So that's where scripts really help, because you can stay on track. You can see them. Again, scripts can take a lot of different forms. They can be outlines. Once you're comfortable with them, they can kind of be verbatim when you're not. I love to have documents like this because it's not a full script, but it gives me a great way to practice, right? I can just review this before a call, once a week, every so often. Oh, I'm getting hung up on some things, or I'm getting stuck, or for whatever reason things aren't pushing through. Just pull this document up and say, like, oh, maybe have I heard any of these objections? Or like, maybe I'm not listening. Maybe I didn't hear something. So it gives me a great document to kind of review through. So again, hope this helps you handle some common objections within your insurance sales, and love to have you for more of these videos as we continue to kind of work through how to have our best sales day ever. See you on the next one.